This is the mystery fungus, probably one of the most disgusting organisms in Bikini Bottom. This fungus appears in the episode Fungus Among Us, and yeah, it gets pretty sussy. The episode starts with Gary waking up Spongebob because he has no food. Is Spongebob starving him because there's literally cobwebs in his bowl? Anyway, Spongebob decides to give Gary organic snail food. Gary smells the food and gags at it, so he decides to move across the room right towards the nasty sea fungus on the floor. Gary licks his lips and takes a big bite out of it, and he's munching on that thing. But Spongebob walks up to him and grabs Gary off the floor. He tells Gary shame on him and also that he's a bottom feeder. Take note of this because it will be important later in the video. Spongebob sets Gary down to wipe the goopy fungus off the floor. Little does he know he's about to start something horrible. The pile of fungus doesn't seem to go away, and we can see Spongebob scratching his head. After hearing his doorbell ring, Patrick gets freaked out at Spongebob because the stinky fungus is on his head. He's literally shaking as he tries to show Spongebob the green goop, and Spongebob asks Patrick what to do to get rid of it. This is when Patrick gives him the worst advice ever. He tells him he should scratch it like there's no tomorrow. And of course, Spongebob agrees. After this horrible idea, the fungus is now in between his eyeballs. He freaks out and puts pimple cream on it. I'm pretty sure that lump of fungus isn't a pimple, but at least he's trying. We can see Spongebob doing everything to get rid of the itch, but the fungus starts to grow bigger and bigger, and he can't stop scratching his head. He tries his best to act normal at work when a goop of fungus drips on his nose, so he flicks it off and it splatters on the wall. Spongebob still thinks nothing of it and decides to get back to work.
Must stop scratching!
Squidward walks in on him and is totally freaked out. At this point, he's scratching himself like a dog. And this is when the episode gets crazy. Squidward calls a SWAT team to help him, but they end up doing nothing. So they send in someone with a hazmat suit, and he forces Spongebob into a cage and takes him away.
What's going on, Squidward?
As he flies away, a fungus particle lands on Squidward's head, and we watch as he spreads the germ to a customer.
Oh, why, thank you very much, young man.
Then, we see Spongebob totally covered in the green goop. He tells the doctor he wants to go home, but they decide to leave him there until the ick goes away. Oh yeah, and Gary is trapped too. After that, Patrick shows up and walks right into the bubble, and Spongebob tells him to be careful not to pop it. But Patrick doesn't listen, of course, and starts chewing on the bubble and stomping it with spiky shoes. To be honest, this is the first time I've noticed Patrick has teeth. Anyway, Patrick asks Spongebob to play a game of pirate wrestling, and to no surprise, Spongebob agrees to play. I think we all know what happens next. They end up destroying his bubble entirely. While Patrick celebrates, Spongebob is freaking out on what to do. After that, Patrick blows a bubble around him. I don't know how this new bubble isn't popping because Spongebob is pushing it around like he's a guinea pig. He puts his hat on and heads back to work. And this is when we see some real problems at the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krabs is trying to flip burgers to cover for Spongebob, and Squidward is flinging the fungus all over the food. We can see him serving the customers with all the goop covering their plates. At this point, I don't know how no one is noticing that their food is contaminated. The fungus gets so bad that Squidward is fully covered in it. The customers finally realize what is happening. And this is when we see Mr. Krabs walk out of his office covered in the goop. Before Mr. Krabs can settle everyone down, Spongebob walks into the Krusty Krab looking like a monster.
SpongeBob SquarePants, returning for duty, sir.
He even has fungus squirting out of his face. The customers get so angry and try to attack Spongebob, but they end up bouncing off his bubble. As they continue to fight, Gary is seen dumpster diving for food. Nothing is mentioned about how he escaped the bubble, but I'll come back to this later. Anyway, Spongebob's bubble pops and covers the whole restaurant in the green fungus. And in the heat of crisis, we watch Gary eat up all the green goo off of Mr. Krabs. By now, they figured out Gary can save them all.
Oh, me next!
Where are your manners? It's ladies first.
But as typical as Mr. Krabs is, he charges everyone $5 to be de-icked. He even asks them if they want a Krabby Patty afterward. And even Spongebob has to pay to get cleaned by his own snail. Can we take a moment to realize Spongebob is getting scanned by his own boss? Anyway, the episode comes to an end. And before I talk about what I liked about this episode, I want to talk about the plot holes. Like, how did Gary escape the bubble? I really don't think he is strong enough to break it. Maybe he was able to bite at it just like he did the fungus. Or how did Mr. Krabs even get infected? We saw him grab Squidward to make Krabby Patties, but he didn't touch any of it. And then later on, we see him open his door and he's covered head to toe in the fungus. Going back even further to the beginning of the episode, how did the fungus appear in SpongeBob's house in the first place? All we were given in the episode is that the fungus spreads really fast and is very itchy. It would make sense if he left some food out or forgot to take out the trash. That's just my take on how the green ick started, but who really knows? Let me know in the comments if you have some evidence on how the fungus appeared. Anyway, let's get into why this episode is amazing, even though it's gross. First of all, the story is straight up entertaining. It grabbed my attention the whole way through. It starts off right away with the main problem, but also the solution. You see, if Gary ate all the nasty fungus off the floor, SpongeBob would never get infected by it, and there would be no story in the first place. The episode would literally be 2 minutes long, but that's not fun. Instead, we see SpongeBob go through big character development. At first, he knows that something's not right, but he chooses to ignore it to try and get through the day.
Don't worry, SpongeBob. Everyone gets itchy, swollen skin rash now and then.
We can see a transformation happen in SpongeBob as he realizes the fungus is getting worse, and instead of trying to solve the problem, he just puts on his work hat and calls it a day. Even after being quarantined, he still tries to go to work. Now, I don't know about you, but if I had green fungus all over my head, I'd probably go straight to the hospital. But we can see how committed SpongeBob is to his job, as he tries, but fails, to hide it from Squidward. What I believe is the craziest part of this episode is how Gary knows he can save everyone, but he chooses not to. I might be wrong, but I think Gary is pretty intelligent. So waiting until the very end to save everyone was crazy. It wasn't the right thing to do, but it was a power move nonetheless. But yeah, this episode was great. I thought it was very crazy and gross, but most importantly, it was entertaining. This is just one of those episodes you can't unsee. I know SpongeBob can be dumb sometimes, but that makes the story even more entertaining.
I won't let this minor setback hinder my fry cooking.
Be sure to check out my other SpongeBob episode, where I cover how evil SpongeBob can really be. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button to show support to the channel. Thanks for watching.